and I knew I was leaving. I I knew it. It's an indescribable, unmistakable feeling. By the time I was at, like, say you're in the doorway, she's going, no, you have to go back. It's learning to be okay with silence and being your own company while embracing those small moments that may come up. So things like hugs, we take them for granted.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of Soul Inspired. Today, I have Tywanah Evette with us. She is a intuitive healer, a psychic, and possibility of a future motivational speaker. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But thank you for coming on today and taking the time.
Thank you for having me. This is so exciting.
Yeah, the other thing I didn't mention right away, I should have right at the top, is that you've had near-death experiences. You've had more than, I think you've had three, from what I
Yes.
understand.
Yes, I
So
have.
yeah, so digging into that right away, I kind of lead the direction of everything. I go on a flow. I say that in all my episodes, but the first question I usually ask anybody is if you think of your first experience, okay, if you just put
Hmm.
that in the back of your mind and you think of who Tawana was before, so who you were before the experience. Could I get a
Hmm.
little backstory of who you were before that?
Um, a single mother, a people pleaser, um, was willing to sacrifice every and anything about myself, um, just for people to like me or love me. And that didn't leave for a while, but it was definitely the beginning of me noticing those tendencies. Going through the full sudden onset of renal failure, with only a few hours left of life. So yeah, I just wanted to be seen. I wanted somebody to just see me. And it changed after that. It definitely changed.
So you said you were a single mother.
Yes, yes. I have three
Okay.
beautiful daughters.
And but you found yourself, you were someone probably with lower confidence, I would assume, based on what you said.
Yeah. No self-esteem, no self-confidence, low self-worth from all the trauma that I had in childhood, which of course compounded matters. I had been in a car accident 6 years before that, that I'm still affected to this day by the injuries that I sustained. So the medication that I was on played a little bit of a role in everything. Yeah, it was just a bunch of like weird coincidences, and it wound up being where I was on the phone with a friend, and I thought I was having a normal conversation, and she we end the phone call, and I'm standing in the kitchen doing dishes. I hadn't felt well, but I had no clue. I thought I had the flu or something. And she calls my eldest daughter, and she's like, something's wrong with your mother. Get her to the hospital now. And when I got to the hospital, they said if I had fallen asleep at home or if I had been at home 12 more hours, I would not be here. I
Wow.
was full renal failure, on the transplant list, family members being tested, with zero possibility of recovery, but I beat that.
And this was your first experience, right? Your first
Yeah,
ND. How
it was
what year was this, or how old were you when sharing?
2010.
2010. Okay.
Yes.
So you were okay. So in 2010. So that's not even really that long ago. I mean, even just that
No,
first experience.
no.
So okay. And before we get deeper into what happened with the experience, was your childhood around any type of spirituality, religion? Did you have any background in anything that would, you know, have anything to do with what we're about to talk about, I guess?
My
uh,
mom knew I was psychic. I knew early on I was psychic, but then, you know, she got officially married to my biological father, and he was very religious. So it went from me learning about my gift to shh. don't say anything about your gift. And then I married someone who was very religious. So I just kind of, shoved all of that to the side.
Okay.
It all just comes back.
So as a child, there was this idea that you had some gifts,
Yes.
and that, of course, around some religions is not really looked
In
upon very
Christianity,
well.
no.
Right. And so this was something that you knew as a child. Okay. So I kind of wanted to know if you had had any backstory of that. So thank you for
Yes,
answering that.
yes.
Thank you. So let's, because you have some extensive moments here, let's really dig in a little bit. So this first experience, you find yourself at the hospital. They said if you wouldn't have gotten yourself there, you probably would have passed on. When did things kind of change? Like, what, if you could lead us up to what happened, would you be able to explain that?
Well, after they got me to the hospital and, we found out what was going on, of course, there are nurses and doctors flying everywhere. There are parts being brought in, there are tools. They've got both arms, blood's coming out. I'm in and out of consciousness. And I knew I was leaving. I I knew it. It's an indescribable, unmistakable feeling. Um, when you finally begin to separate from your avatar, your 3D body, and you start to view all that's going on around you and with you from a bird's eye above. I remember grabbing my eldest daughter's hand and trying to squeeze it as I was slipping out
Oh,
of
wow.
consciousness. Um, and then I went in the void.
So
Then,
sorry to interrupt you there, but this is just really quickly. That's the first time I've heard someone. So you were grabbing your daughter's hand,
yes,
almost in a way of maybe a loving nature, or it could be like, I got to stay here, I'm leaving,
yeah,
type
yeah.
feeling. I don't know. That's
It
what
it
I
was
got from what you
both,
explained. A little bit of
a
both.
mixture of both.
And you
You
said the
know,
bird's eye view. Is that same thing people say where it's, I'm out of my body, I'm above my body, and I can
yes,
see down now?
yes.
Quick question. Were you feeling the moments of holding on your daughter's hand and being above at the same time, or did it happen at a different time?
It was a different time. I remember feeling like I was slipping away, and you know, it was like I wanted her to know I loved her. She was there. And so it was just wanting to, that last, couldn't hug her, but it was like that last hug for me because I knew I was going.
Okay, so so after that happened, you said you found yourself in the void, and what was that like?
Yes. The most peaceful feeling you could ever possibly experience. Your ears start ringing louder, but the sounds around you get softer. So all the shuffling, all of the, nurse get this, doctor get that, paging, all of that starts to fade, but that ringing in your ears becomes overwhelmingly loud. And then you're in this peaceful space where you feel no pain, you feel no loss, all of those negative, you know, feelings that we would normally feel in that moment are gone. And it's just this, it's like turning all the lights off and being in a spa. It's just this very calming, peaceful space. And I remember being pulled forward. There's no direction in the void, but if I have to describe it, it's like an energy that's pulling you forward, into finality. And I remember liking that feeling for a minute. I was like, wow, I've never felt peace in my life. I've been a survivor my whole life. This is peace. And my eldest daughter had just turned 18. And I remember saying, like, if you can describe it as talking, but I remember thinking or being or feeling, oh, my two youngest children. And I remember, the force is pulling me gently and lovingly into this peaceful space. And I remember like doing an about face and fighting like hell to get back. It's pulling me as I'm, you know, trying to get back to my body because I still had a 10 and an 8-year old.
Yeah.
So that sense of responsibility of I'm a single parent. I I have to try to fight to get back to them. The eldest is 18, but I still have two elementary school children. And that's what I did. And when I came back in, it was like a whooshing feeling, like like cannonballing
Hmm.
into a pool. And that's when I could feel the pain of them, everything they were doing and stuff like that. And there were days that I regretted that coming back because dialysis is unexplainably painful.
Yeah.
People don't understand your blood can hurt. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
it hurts. It's very painful. So I spent 3 weeks in the hospital with a physician who he was a very darker skinned gentleman, and he kept upping my depression medicine. He put me on depression medicine because I wouldn't set up the dialysis coming out of the hospital. And so he's like, you're depressed, you're not accepting this, we're going to keep you, blah, 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 and give you dialysis in the hospital. And I kept telling him, I'm not going to be on dialysis. I will not be on dialysis. And they removed my gallbladder. A few weeks later, they found out that was an issue. And I thought I remembered the nurse waking me up saying, your kidneys are working, but you're coming out of surgery. You think all types of stuff, you're foggy, you're still anesthetized. So I didn't think anything of it. But the doctor walks into my room a few hours later and he's pale as a ghost. And he said, I don't know what spirits you have on your side, but your kidneys are functioning fully. We've taken you off the transplant list and you can be discharged.
Wow.
And I looked at him and I said, I told you. I just knew.
You knew coming
I
back.
just knew. Mm-hmm. I knew.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I knew that, and I still have my little scar where they put the port in and all of that stuff. And
Right.
they kept the port in for 2 weeks, after discharge from home, just for safety, just in case. But I just knew.
Wow. That's incredible. Thanks for sharing that first experience. I've got quite a few questions, and because I know you've had a few others, I'll try to make it brief, but I do want to just say thanks for sharing it. I one
Absolutely.
one thing I notice a lot of times when I hear NDEs is whether it's, just different people talking about it, it's that's your life experience. That's a
Mm-hmm.
pretty big deal. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's why a lot of times you find people who had an NDE when they were 12 and they're now 74 and talking about it. And people say,
Right.
why did you wait 55 years? Or I did do the math right there, but why did you wait that long to explain what happened? And it's like, that is so close to me. That's so
Mm-hmm.
much, because you said quite a few things that really stuck out for me. You said, when you went in the void, how peaceful it was. We always
Mm-hmm.
say when we lose people or we know people who've been lost, we say, well, now they're at peace. And it's like, where did we get that from? Well, I think it's through our history. It's through
Mm-hmm.
something. It's come from somewhere. That terminology has come from somewhere. Why do we all
Mm-hmm.
think we go to peace? It wasn't just to
Because
make
we
everyone
do.
right, but it wasn't to make everyone just feel better. Like there's
Right.
something that occurs over time that gets us to say something like that. So
Exactly.
the way you said it, it was exactly how you hear it when people talk about it. I do want. I'm going to use this moment to ask a question I've never asked any of my NDE guests because I've always questioned this, and I thought maybe this will work itself out. If not, that's fine. But you said you were in the void,
Mm-hmm.
but other people explain that it was like this blackness or this darkness, this different kind of reality. And
Yes.
and the moment when I hear dark, black darkness, it feels scary. Like it feels like
Mm-hmm.
I'm in this scary place. Like you think of like an alleyway, it's in the dark. Like that's the first humanistic feeling. So I
Mm-hmm.
was wondering if you can explain how can it be dark and black in nothingness, but feel so peaceful? I don't know if there's a way you can explain that any further.
For women, it would be being at the spa, they turn the lights off and they leave that peaceful music on. You know, after your massage, they have you lay on the table for a little while and you just feel that, you know, if your eyes are closed, and for men it would probably be, you know, sitting back with a beer, you know, on a day off, all the bills are paid. Um, but it's not a void in a negative way. It's not like a black hole, or it doesn't feel like it's eating you up, and there's no screaming and gnashing of teeth and all of this, you know. That was never my experience. It was just pure peace.
Okay.
Pure peace. Just unexplainable peace.
Yeah, the thing that always got me is when people explain it, then they'll say something like, I could have stayed there for eternity. You go,
Yes.
how? I mean, don't you want to come here and, you know, I'm a songwriter. I don't want to come here and write a song or go to a show or hang out
No.
with, like, how is that? You know, it's so hard to understand as a human that just being in a void of peace can feel that
Mhm.
much better than the things that we go through.
It is, but think about it, you know, we're robots technically. We operate, you know, get up, you get your coffee, you go to work, you do this, you do that. We're always doing something. Rarely are we being. And in that space, you just are. You're not expected to do it, you just are. And if it had not been for my two underage children, I would not have fought to come back, because it was the best feeling in the world. There
Okay.
was no pain.
And the other thing I was going to say, and I was actually going to touch on that quickly, would you, before I do, would you say this out of the three experiences you had was your most profound?
No, the
Okay.
third one is the most
The
profound.
most profound is the third. Okay.
Mhm.
So in the moment, I'm going to ask you a personal question about your experience. In the moment when your children, when the thought of your children, I think you said you had an 18-year-old, but you also had two other younger ones,
Mhm.
10 and 12, or I'm sorry if I get the numbers
It's
wrong.
okay.
Um, but you're thinking of them. You're in
Mhm.
this moment. Was there ever a thought that came to you of, oh, okay, this is what I've been waiting for. Like this is like this trueness of what I really am. And now I know it's real. And then there's this moment of clarity of like, oh, but I'm still doing that thing. And
Yes.
I gotta go do that. But now at least I know this now is here waiting for me. So I gotta get back though before it's too late.
Yes.
I'm having hair come off my arms because I don't know what that's the
Yes.
feeling that's coming over me.
That is a perfect explanation.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. So you had come to terms with what was going on.
Yes.
Then once you're coming to terms with it, you're like, okay, here we go. And then you're going, oh, wait a second.
Mm-hmm.
And then as soon as you felt their energy, you rushed back and there was a whoosh and you're back in your body. And then you go through the pain of recovery.
Yes. Yes. That's exactly how it is.
Okay. So thanks for answering those questions. On those, I'm wondering what happened between, because you said there was three, so there must have been another experience at some point.
Yes. In 20, what year was that? My granddaughter was born 2015. Um, September of 2015, my middle child, who is also a psychic, but she doesn't, we had a scary experience one time. So, you know, she kind of shut that side down. I was feeling flu-like. We lived across the street from the high school. So I heard marching band practice start. You know, I could hear the drums, but then I hear the garage door come up and I'm like, oh, did you forget your water jug or something? She goes, Mom, get in the car. Well, and the first thing I think of, did your younger sister get, you know, hurt? Because one was in band, one was in color guard. So I'm like assuming that her younger sister got hurt on the field or something. And I'm like, she's like, no, Mom, just get in the car. And she's like emotional. And this child had not driven more than 1 mile in her life. And she takes me and pushes me in the passenger side. But because I wasn't feeling well, I really wasn't, I'm not fighting too hard. I'm just
Right.
wondering what's going on. I'm assuming we're going to the school. Something happened.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time we got to the end of that 1 mile marker to turn onto the main road, I was seizing.
Oh, wow.
And she thought I was having a stroke, but that's the connection that she has with me. She knows when something is wrong. And so I know that I remember hearing the click of the hazards. I was coming in and out of consciousness. And she said that at one point after the second seizure, I woke up and turned around and looked at her and said, "Your grandmother is sitting in the back seat. How dare you not acknowledge her?" My mother had been dead for years.
Oh, wow.
And then I had another seizure. So she got me to the hospital after 3 seizures. Thank goodness we didn't live far from Emory Hospital in Atlanta. And they had to sedate me for a couple of days to get them to stop. So I just remember waking up a few days later, but I remember seeing my mom on the other side during one of those seizures. Um, and she just kept saying, "Hold on, baby, you have to go back."
Mm.
And, I love my mom. I miss her every day of my life. I wanted to be with her, you know? And she's going, "No, it's not time. You have to go back." And so I fought through that. And I still have the seizure disorder, but thank goodness it's not as nearly as active as it used to be. We've got it under control. But I just remember her being there. I didn't even get into the void this time. By the time I was at, like, say you're in the doorway, she's going, "No, you have to go back."
Mm.
And I'm sorry. She said it was because you knew the feeling you would not have gone back. Honestly, my mother is always here with me, so she talks. And if I'm ever looking in that direction, it's because she's intervening with her Leo self.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I came back and I fought through that, and that was terrifying because they just come. You don't really have too much of a warning, and I was having grand mals, and you know, but she said, "No, you have to go back." She knew I wouldn't have come back.
So she knew that if you would have experienced that feeling again, that you wouldn't have had the strength the second time
Yes.
to jump back in and give it a third shot. Give it a third
Yes,
shot
exactly.
at a time.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay. So that one's an interesting one because it was more visionary. It was you see you in your back car while you're having these seizures.
Mm-hmm.
But you said during a large seizure while being treated, you spoke with her and she was like, "Not
Mm-hmm.
your time." I'm digging in a little bit with that. You didn't go through a tunnel, you didn't have all these experiences. Was it more of like a knowingness that she was just there with you, or do you actually recall visionary pieces of that where you were sitting with her, like anything that comes to you, or was
It
it just
was
knowing?
just like it's the void still, but to give you a visual, it's like she's standing at the threshold of a door. And on the other side of that door is that nothingness. And
Okay.
she would not let me cross the threshold of that door. She literally pushed me and said, "No, you have to go back."
So in your spirit bodies, she wasn't allowing you to go through because that would have
No.
crossed over. And visually, do you see her when
Yes.
in that moment? And what age would she have been when you seen her around that?
Um,
How you
it
remember her?
wasn't she looked healthy. She didn't look like she did when she passed. My mother passed from renal failure,
Mm,
ironically. And we're both 5'8", and she was probably all of 75 pounds. So she looked like healthy mom, maybe like when she was in her 40s
okay.
is when the way she looked, but she looked like healthy mom. She didn't look like sick mom.
Right. Okay. So, okay. Curious of that too sometimes just to know. So, okay. And it's interesting, but did you say it was your daughter that put you in the car and drove you?
My middle child,
Your
yes.
your middle child. And this is the one who has exemplified having gifts as well.
Yes.
So, I've talked before about I don't know what I have, but mine's all intuition and I feel, and I can feel
Hmm.
people all the time. Um, I'm wondering if she got that and it was so overwhelming, or if she's physically seen you and saw something was wrong. It could be a combination of both, right? But um,
She said that she just knew something was going to happen. She
mm,
had this overwhelming feeling that something bad was going to happen. And she remembered what was funny is the day before that, I was having a conversation with one of the fellow band moms. We were watching them practice. And I remember telling her, I said, I lost a chunk of time today and I don't know what happened. Like, I just, and she's like, oh, you probably fell asleep. You know, sometimes your medication makes you sleepy. And I'm
mhm.
like, no, I kind of usually know when I doze off for sleep. I literally lost a piece of time. So apparently I had had a seizure the day before and didn't know it. I was at home alone in the recliner with the dog.
Right.
Um, but she said she just knew something bad was going to happen and she had to get me to the hospital.
I mean, it's just incredible that she had that intuition to drive you. That's incredible.
She's she's my hero. She is the bravest woman I know.
Is that the same daughter you were grabbing under her hand?
No, this is the middle one.
It's the middle one.
Yes.
And okay, so you get the seizures under control.
Hmm.
I think from what I gathered from just reading your bio that the third one was pretty it was a little different from the first two in
Very
the
much
sense
so.
of your life journey. So,
Yes.
can you paint a picture of what happened between I think you said that was 2015 up until that moment? What was going on in your life? Like why did we get to that place? Can you explain a little bit about that?
I was in a relationship that I thought was good because he's this fourth grade teacher. He's charismatic. You know, he's saying that we're going to get married. And I'm not being hit or anything, but I didn't know I was being abused psychologically. Um, and for 2 years, he would he knew about my seizure disorder. His son has a seizure disorder, and he would scream at me for days on end, just yell at me, call me nasty names, say things that should never come out of another human being's mouth about someone's past.
Hmm.
Um, and but because it wasn't physical, I didn't know I was being abused. My best friend at the time was concerned, and I had um I had come up to DC. My sister's partner of 25 years passed away suddenly. So I flew from Atlanta up here to help her. And my best friend at the time, she's like, why don't you just go to your house when you go home? You know, you kind of need some time to process. Why don't you just go to your house? And I'm like, no, he's expecting me to be there, that kind of thing. And so when I flew back home after helping my sister bury her partner, I still had not processed that her partner, that he was gone. You know what I mean? Because I had to be strong for her while I was here. So I hadn't even had a chance to process it myself. And on the flight home, she texted me and she said, T, please go home. And I'm like, no, they're already on the way to the airport, blah, 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 blah. I'm just gonna take my medicine and go to bed. She had that feeling because she said she knew it was abuse, but if she had tried to tell me it was abuse, I may have reacted negatively to it. And
Right.
I probably would have because I didn't realize it was abuse. So I get in the car and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot how great of a learning experience DC can be. We should, my family wants to meet you. Your sister lives up there. We should take your son on a trip up there and take him to all the museums because the child is a genius and loves learning. And I felt the car get cold and I'm like, oh God, what did I say wrong? So the hour ride home, I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, what did I say? But I'm talking nervously at this point. And we got home. He put my suitcase in the room. I went to hug him. He kind of pushed away. I'm tired. It's 11 p.m. I just watched my sister fall apart. Um, so I go and take my shower, come back in the living room, and he says, I'm not going anywhere where you traipsed around town with some other man. Huh? Are you talking about the man I was married to back then? Like, I told you that I worked for the White House appointees. I still haven't been to, the sites here. But at the time when I was married and living here, I worked for White House appointees. I was on call 24/7. There was no time to go to a museum. There was no time to visit the monument. I pass the buildings every day. Yeah, they're nice, whatever. I got to go to work.
Right.
And so I'm trying to figure out, what are you talking about? And he is a very insecure person.
Yeah.
And the argument started. And I'm really like trying to back off. At this point, I'm recording by audio with my phone in my robe pocket because I need to know I'm not crazy at this point. I need to know that I'm not losing my mind. And after 4 or 5 hours of him drilling, I just stood up, I went in the bedroom, and I went to sleep, but I kept recording. The next morning, I got up, I made coffee, I went back in the room and went back to sleep. He slept on the couch. And then he comes in the room and, is there something physically wrong with you? And I'm just like, I can't take this anymore. I, I can't do this anymore. Like, I had never felt so worthless in my life.
Mm.
I had never felt so unnecessary in my life. And in that moment, I grabbed my entire bottle of sleeping pills that had just been refilled and swallowed them with coffee and then followed it with vinegar so that they would melt. And he's like, oh, now I got to go get Ipecac. And he leaves the house. I put my sweatshirt on, walked into the woods, and went to sleep. My middle child again had a feeling something was wrong. She tried to call my phone. Of course, I didn't pick up. She tried looking at the location on my phone. And from my understanding, because, I get two different versions of what happened, she calls him and is like, why is mom in the woods? And he's like, oh, she's crazy. She just stormed out of the house, blah, 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 blah. I'm trying to find her. I believe my daughter's version of the story. But after I fell asleep, it was like I'm walking in the dark to the edge of a forest. And at the edge of the forest was the man my mother had been with before she legally married my father. My dad was out of my life for some time. So my stepdad was there and my mother was there. And I'm like, oh my God, Daddy, I haven't seen, like, and they said, you're not finished. You have a mission. You have a purpose. You have to go back. And it was almost conversational at that point. I could see them. They both looked healthy. They both looked concerned. But they're like, you have to go back. You have a purpose. And I'm like, no, I don't have a purpose. I don't, nobody loves me. Nobody cares whether I live or die. I don't have one. And they're like, no, you do. And this is the start of it. And push me back. And I wake up in a hospital.
Okay. So just to reiterate, I do this sometimes with just, I'm sure my audience may get annoyed with me, but this is how I do things because I'm doing this for myself too. You were in a relationship that was negative, toxic. It sounds like it was, but you didn't know
Yes.
because it was a mental um toxicity. And
Yes.
that can those type of relationships, unfortunately, they're not so because they're not physical, you don't see it coming, right? And it starts
No.
to build up and then it hits, and then by that time your self-esteem and worth has gone to
It's,
nothing.
yeah.
And unfortunately, some people make terrible decisions and heat of the moment, those types of things. It seems like that's kind of the way this worked.
Yes.
Now, just to be clear, he was aware you did this
Yes.
and he was going to get you something to I don't know the terms of what he said. He was going to
Yeah.
get.
Ipecac is a syrup that induces vomiting
Okay, so that way you
because
don't.
he was afraid of how it would look to
Mm,
other people.
okay. Okay. So toxicity, the drama behind it all, everything kind of got out of control, and you were looking to exit,
Yes.
and then you said you were in the woods because you actually went into the woods physically. This is real,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And you laid down in the woods, and you then see your mother again.
Yes.
It's been a big influence in these experiences, and in the two at least, and then your stepfather.
Yes.
Are they physically with you in the woods? Like, does it
Yes.
look like they're physically there? Like, if someone were to
Yes.
approach you from the woods, any stranger coming through the
Yes.
woods, but the scenery is the exact, it is the woods. It is in
Yes.
our 3D reality. So
Mm-hmm.
they visit from a spiritual realm
Mm-hmm.
to speak with you. Okay. Just clarifying the way because I'm like, was it a different woods? Was it,
No.
was the grass talking to you? I get so many different experiences that come at me from different people. I'm just trying to clarify. So
Mm-hmm.
you were not even going to the threshold. So it's interesting. The very first ND you have, you literally you were crossing over. You were going. The
Yes.
second one, you weren't even allowed past the doorstep. And the third one,
No.
you're not even allowed to see the doorstep. You
No.
are just, and so you've been advised quite a few times now to stick around
Mm-hmm.
to do your work. Have you learned your lesson at this point? Have you
100%. I fight for my life now. Despite the seizure disorder and living alone, which can be scary sometimes now that I do want to stay around. But I've learned that I do have a purpose, and it's to bring awareness of different cycles of abuse to other people. Because so that they don't feel worthless, so that they don't feel like they're a nobody. It's the worst feeling in the world when you think that not a soul on this planet would care if
Mhm,
you transitioned. And I want to keep people from being in that space.
mhm,
That's my purpose. It's to speak on it, to share my story and my experiences to heal others. And now that I've accepted that, I fight like hell to stay around.
well, we're all happy you do.
Thank
Um,
you.
if you were to speak to someone who does feel alone, if someone's out there and they do feel alone, they feel in that place. And I don't go down this topic very often on the stories. I try to keep things positive.
Hmm.
But it's reality. And how would you help someone or help convince someone of their own thoughts in the sense of I find sometimes when people decide to do something like that, I mean, in your circumstance is a perfect example because it's based off one person's opinion of you or the way they treat
Hmm.
you, one individual, and yet there's what 7 or 8 billion people on this planet.
Hmm.
How do we get caught into that trap of feeling needing to feel purposeful towards one individual when really it's for everyone. Like, how do we work through that? Like, what would you suggest to someone if they're feeling
Um,
that way?
Number one, listen to your friends. They, it's not that they don't want to see you happy in a relationship. It's that they can sometimes recognize things that you being on the inside can't. So they have that outside perspective. They have the bigger picture, whereas you're focused on the details. Number two, we are all here for a purpose. And whether we know that purpose or not, it doesn't matter. We are here for a reason. Each and every one of us shares purpose. It could be to smile at a person in Walmart one day that is feeling low. It could be anything, but all of our lives have meaning. And, you know, if somebody had just said to me, you do have a purpose, you are necessary, you know, it would have changed things. But my children were adults by then. I'm thinking they don't need me, and I was also going through the empty nester kind of period where they're both in college now, and they have their own lives. It's not that they didn't love me or want to spend time with me, but they're learning and growing. They're having that college experience that I never got to have. So I felt like they didn't need me anymore. They're okay now. They're adults. They're past that 18, 19 mark. And every relationship I've been in has been toxic because my father, you know, dad is the one, my natural father is the one who is supposed to show you what to look for in your mate. They're supposed to be the example.
Right.
Unfortunately, he's a pedophile. So I found abusive people because I was accustomed to being silenced and abused. So I learned that was normal. But that psychological, I hate to put it this way, but I would rather have a black eye than to hear some of the things that he said again. Because eventually that black eye is going to heal, and eventually you may not even think about it.
Yeah.
But that psychological warfare, pretty much, for the last 2.5 years, I have refused to be in a relationship, and I have remained celibate because of it, because there's so much that your nervous system goes through in that space, and you don't realize the body holds the memory, but we are all necessary. And, I'm one of those people who, if I meet someone and they're going through something, all right, your number's going on emergency bypass. I've got the loudest ringtone I can on my phone. It doesn't matter whether I'm awake or asleep. You call me, I will be there
Yeah.
because I know what that space feels like, you know? And that's one of the things that I want to do in the future is to open up an actual center that does help people, not just throw them in the hospital on a 3-day hold and, forget they exist.
Right.
But we all have a purpose. It's just a matter of us loving ourselves enough to find it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, so you're saying turn to your friends, the people who are really in your life that are there to help guide you. You don't necessarily need to be in a relationship to
No,
feel needed. I mean, even you
you should
saying,
actually not, that shouldn't be part of it at all.
right, until the healing at least is happened, right? I mean, if you're
Right.
in a healing place, you need to heal. And then when that time comes, if it does, great. If it doesn't, look what you just said. You just said you have people on the speed dial. Like you still have people in your life. I think we get a little fixated on what society says is norm, is the norm for
Yes,
life and what we need to be. We need to have a partner. We need to be married. We need to, and it's like, where did all that come from? I mean, yeah, those are great things to experience, but it doesn't mean you always have to have that.
exactly.
And if you do feel like you do, then great, go after that. But if you feel happy and satisfied with the people in your life and the things you're doing, then what's wrong with that? I don't understand.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
Yeah, and definitely do the healing and reach out, and if you are experiencing physical or mental, both are terrible, but I understand what you mean by the mental is a little harsher at times, but to seek the help you need and to get in touch with people that are going to help you through that.
Yes.
The this goes back a little bit to you being an NDE experiencer, and the people that I talk to have had near death experiences, and they have these afterlife experiences and they say how wonderful it was, and then they come back here into this environment in life. And I feel like people who have those experiences have a little bit more of an experience in life in regards to it's almost makes things a little more difficult to
Mhm.
find the happiness that we're always seeking. Okay. I've never had an NDE, but I've had some, I have some things happen in my life that made me question, gave me some food for thought on what we're doing here. And, but I would say someone who's had an NDE, I would imagine it hits a little bit harder. And the question I would have for you, and this is for you and probably all my guests who've had NDEs, maybe they can hear this and then people just listening, the audience, how do we find what is the easiest way to find joy and our own heaven on earth as much as we can? Because I know that you can't create that feeling you likely felt in the afterlife. Most say there's just no feeling like it. But if we can do our best, because I try to keep things positive to people and
Hmm.
say, we are here for a purpose and reason. So
Hmm.
we chose to be here. So what can we be doing in our lives to be bettering ourselves to get closer to that feeling of nirvana that people feel when they pass?
Look for the little things. I create I have literally in the last 2.5 years, including my children, they are no contact with me. It was a bit much for them. It was very hard on them. Um, and to make the decision to stay no contact with me, I applaud them. It's made me admire them because I cannot imagine the pain that they felt in having to cut me off. Um, However, it catapulted me into we are going to dig our heels in and heal, and I'm going to do it. Or, you know, I don't want to say die trying because I'm not in that space.
Right.
I don't want to. But I'm going to do it. And, this time I had to find purpose. I had to find self-love. So looking for the little things, like if I go on a walk, I'll notice flowers and I'll take a picture of it. Or when I'm awake at night, sometimes I just sit out on my balcony and look at the stars. And learning how to love those little moments, a conversation with a person in Target that you've never met before, that's what our life is about.
Mm.
Not the rat race that we're taught, not the road. Yes, you go to school, you get married, you have children. No, that's not it. It's in those small moments that we often take for granted. It's in those little things around us that we do take for granted, to get the bigger house and the faster car, and
Yeah.
to be able to say we have more than someone else. And being stripped of everyone that I loved in my life forced me into searching for those little moments and smiling and saying, oh, the cherry blossoms, they look beautiful. Let me take a photo. Um, that's that's what it's about. That's what life's about. Looking for those meaningful moments, a friend calling you that you haven't heard from in a very long time, and like one called me today and announced that her grandbaby was born. I'm ecstatic. It's an amazing feeling. Those are the moments and the connections that I seek now.
Mm.
And I know I had to find self-love. There's no one else in my life right now. So I had no choice but to love self
Right.
and love learning to it's learning to be okay with silence and being your own company. while embracing those small moments that may come up,
Wow.
you know.
Yeah.
So things like hugs, we take them for granted. We don't realize that some of us haven't had a hug in months. You know what I mean? We take them for granted. Um, Happy birthday text messages. The my middle daughter, the one who is psychically gifted, and we don't speak, but she sent me a happy birthday text.
Hmm.
Years ago, it would have been expected. This time, I cried for joy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
learning to slow down, be okay with self, learn to love you, and however that looks, you know, whether you got your team of friends behind you or whether you just say, you know what, even if you have to believe you're delusional and doing it until you believe it, the fake it till you make it kind of thing. Once you love yourself, it doesn't matter what goes on outside of you. It's
Yeah.
not going to affect you in the same way. So the person that I was with would get laughed at now. I would literally laugh in his face because now I love me. So you can't tell me anything negative about me. I embrace both my flaws and the great things about me, and they are what make me me. And I am special and I am unique and I have a purpose. So there's nothing any man, woman, or child can say that makes me step out of that any longer.
Right. I love that. I like what you said there about how nothing can phase you now. It reminded me of growing up, I watched the movie 8 Mile with Eminem, and he's rapping, he's doing rap battles, and every time he'd do a rap battle, he'd say everything
Mm-hmm.
that was coming first. So the
Mm-hmm.
person who was gonna respond would be like, "Oh man, I got nothing I can say," because
Exactly.
he just took it and he just loved himself about everything about what he was saying, and that's kind of I don't know why that came to me. Movies come to me sometimes when I hear someone say something that's really
It's funny,
meaningful.
that's one of my motivational songs when
Oh,
I
is
feel
it?
like it's go time, the lose yourself,
Yeah, yeah,
the that
yeah,
one. I'll put that on and I'm,
yeah. You're going,
jamming
yeah,
out to it and we're gonna do this,
yeah.
you know.
No, and you said so much about just finding self-love and learning to love the little things. It's so important. We live in a time now where everybody's stuck on their phones. It's go, 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 go. I get caught up in myself, and I'm always like, hey, put it
Mm-hmm.
down, and just sit and look around. Like no one does that anymore. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
People don't even go to the bathroom without taking their phone to the bathroom anymore. It's constant now. It's constant. So
Mm-hmm.
I would encourage anyone who is feeling overwhelmed in life, take a day, start small and stay away from all your social media. Don't watch this video. Um, because I'm on this is social media, but you know what I mean? Like take a day and be just with you.
Yes.
It can be looked at like a blessing what you're going through. And I know that sounds crazy, but so many people are so caught up in the go, go, go
Mm-hmm.
that they think be alone, like with yourself. Like, what does that mean? But they don't know yet. We don't know yet. And that's part of our journey. And you're getting a taste of what it feels like to just find yourself. And
Yes.
that's beautiful. So, you know, um, that's great. A little fun question really quickly here. You are a medium, a psychic, I'm not
Yes.
sure, right? People who experience a feeling of feeling like they might have a gift.
Mm-hmm.
How would you did you have to work through that? How would you encourage people to work with that and accept it, I guess?
Part of it is learning to sit by yourself because that's when we hear the most messages or feel the messages or, all the clairs. Um, Part of it is learning to turn the TV. My TVs haven't been on in since November.
Oh, wow.
Um, Listen, just listen sometimes. Feel, you know, meditation is amazing for this. But just enjoy stillness because first of all, if you're a psychic, they're trying to get your attention. I'm sure your guides, your spirit guides and your ancestors have tried getting your attention in a million different ways. And like you said, we're walking around with a supercomputer glued to our hand all the time. And so that makes it more difficult for them to get those messages through. What my mother did, she waited until I moved, because I moved back to DC to support my sister, to be there for her after her partner's passing. They had a 6-month-old cane corso. She had no idea what to do with him.
Mm.
And, my girls are adults now. So I was able to move from Atlanta back here. But while I was living with her, I would hear little things. And then I remember one day clearly, her partner said, "You can hear me." I guess I moved or, flinched or something. And I'm like, so, but my mom, she's always, in the ears, but it became undeniable when I moved into my apartment. When I
Mm.
was here alone, it got so loud. And I remember her partner talking to me here, and I'm like, well, you don't, that doesn't make sense. How are you here? And I realized I had one of his jackets.
Yeah.
So that gave him the connection to be in my apartment, you know? Um, but my mother was just like, you are a psychic. You're going to accept your gift now. She came through in a recorded RTT hypnotherapy session that I had where she said she never got to fulfill her purpose.
Well,
And so she put like energy, you can feel energy, right? She's not her hands, but she put her hands on my shoulders and she said, "I'm passing my gifts to you so you can finish."
mm.
And she said, "I know I didn't protect you when you were a little girl, but I will protect you fiercely from this side
Mm.
moving forward." And she does, and she has. So it was a lot easier to accept the gifts then. So, she would talk and I would listen or I would write, you just
Yeah.
get a journal and just start writing. I would hear things, I can smell things, I can sense things. I can tell someone what's going on in their life and how to fix it, even though mine was a bucket of mess.
Mm.
Um, and then others, she started telling me, your grandmother's here, your grandfather's here, and they would start speaking. So as I became more comfortable listening to her voice and my stepdad's voice, um, she introduced the others. And so I've got one hell of a team
Yeah.
supporting me. Um, uh, one hell of a team. It got to the point to where she would just give me a name and I had to start looking on ancestry.com because I'm like, I've never heard this name in my life. Like, who are you talking about? Who is this woman that's talking? And like one of them I looked up and it's my fourth great grandmother on my mother's side, Gigi Jerusha. And she she said, we had to hide our gifts, but you don't.
Mm-hmm.
She was born in the 1800s.
Right.
But I had to I'm like, why am I hearing this name? And my mom was just like, look on, do a search. Just look it up. And so yeah, I've got a lineage of psychics that I did not realize were psychic. I knew my mother was. Um, Never knew my grandmother, my nana was, but it explained a lot in her personality. It explained a lot. And then, my two grandmothers behind her. Um, so yeah, my ancestors, my spirit guides, everybody's here, and I listen to what they say. And if they tell me, literally, if they tell me if I'm getting ready to leave the house and they say don't go, I will take everything back off and sit down. We're not going.
Right.
I
Right.
don't need those lessons anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So
So
your family, that's beautiful. Your family's there with you. Your mother, who didn't get to experience the gifts she wanted to experience, or
mhm.
her purpose is, uh, in all respects, not leaving you alone now. She's having you
Exactly.
take take over and pursue that. So that's beautiful. And I think that the biggest thing I got from what you just said for those, again, with the question of what do people do to acknowledge their gifts and use their gifts, is to get into that quiet space to find. It's kind of the theme of what we've been talking about, is having that space and time. And sometimes I wonder, I look at how busy the world is and how many people are so busy, that it's almost like it's such a distraction. Everyone's so distracted.
Hmm.
They're probably not actually picking up on the things that who we truly are.
No.
And it questions, and then you get down the whole rabbit hole. Is there a reason for that? Has this been set up? And then you got to get out of that headspace, because so many people, though, if they would just find that time to themselves,
Hmm.
things could really shift. This world could really shift pretty darn
Very
quick
much so.
if we'd all just take that time. So I would encourage everyone. I've talked about meditation, and I do that as best as I can now, and I try to go back into my music. And sometimes when I calm down with my music, it puts me into those spaces. So
Music is
um,
that creating music and listening to music is a form of meditation. It's not always, sitting cross-legged with the woosah.
right,
It's, it is whatever puts you into that peaceful space.
yeah,
And again, like you said, it's almost like it was by design, because people say, "Oh, I can't meditate. I don't, I can't quiet my mind long enough to meditate." Put on some music that you love. Start writing, start painting. It's a form of meditation. It's what gets us our brain waves in that space.
that's why I've always loved creativity. I think the creative arts, music, dance,
Mm-hmm.
painting, whatever, those are used from a different part of our brain, and they put us into more of a calmer state. And I think that's when
Yes.
things can when it's almost like you power things back on again. It was
Yes.
interesting you saying that your ancestors, being in the 1800s, yeah, I mean, they would have can be considered witches and these
Oh,
terrible,
yeah.
like we couldn't do that kind of stuff and talk about these type of things. And now you look at even my podcast, who I've only been running this 5 months, and my NDE passion is so strong, and seeing how fast we're growing, because I think deep down people know there's so much more to us. Where can people find you? I'm curious. Like, how do people get in touch with you if you do some work?
Um, blackbutterflygoddess.com. Um, my social media for this purpose is Black Butterfly Goddess on TikTok, on Instagram and Facebook. And then email is info@blackbutterflygoddess.com. So I tried to make it easy.
I love the name. That's perfect.
Thank you. It was
That's cool.
butterflies have always been my thing, but I realized that in order to love my whole self, I had to accept what was perceived as fault and darkness and the light. So
Yeah.
I kind of have gone through my cocoon and I'm now emerging.
Well, it all sounds perfect. One of the last questions I ask every person, anyone who's watched my podcast would know what's about to happen. I always just ask them, and I mean, I think you've answered this question through the podcast, but through the episode here. But the question is really to leave everything as the question as, why are we here?
We are here energetically to raise the vibration of this planet, but we're here to love one another, to learn to love one another, regardless of what, because faults are perception. They're people's perception of you. Um, but if we loved on one another a little bit more, if we applied a little bit more grace to people, a little bit more understanding, this world would be a very different place.
Mhm.
So we're here to love.
I think,
That's
yeah,
it.
I love that. And I think one of the most difficult parts of that is to love the enemy.
Yes, it is. But even in that, I can't find hate or negativity in my experience with, my perceived enemy would be him. But even in that, I send him love because he needs more light than most of us do.
Yeah.
And hating him would mean I hate where I am now.
Mm,
That catapulted me into my purpose, that
wow.
experience. So for that, I'm thankful. If I ever saw him again, I would say thank you. And it would probably hurt his pride and his little ego and things like that. But I'm grateful for that experience because I finally have a purpose.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And if we can get a it's like a change of perspective.
Yes, very much so.
That's really coming out of almost like looking at yourself from above, talking about the NDEs, looking at yourself from above, watching the story unfold and say, oh, that's why. Because we get
Yes,
caught in this and
yes.
feeling sorry for ourselves and feeling bad and becoming a victim through our life. And I
Yeah, no.
understand. It sounds like obviously so many people have such terrible experiences at times, but to be able to come out and watch how it unfolded.
Hmm.
So thank you so much for all the wisdom, the conversation. This has been great.
Thank you.
Yeah, this has been really nice. I generally turn to the camera and say thanks for subscribing. Please like, share, subscribe, get these messages out, get these stories out because they help
Yes.
people in so many ways. And today we talked about so many different things that I'm sure somebody will get something very valuable out of it. So thanks for being on the show today.
Absolutely. It's been an honor and a pleasure.